Smith and my colleagues for being here today to stand up for the state of Minnesota, for our nation, and for our Constitution. In the last year, we have too often come to the floor to discuss tragedies in our state. This summer, an assassin killed our friend Melissa Hortman, the former Speaker of the Minnesota House, and her husband, Mark. And we were once again shaken to our core when a mass shooter attacked Annunciation Catholic Church right in the middle of Mass. Children in their first week of school, 2 children murdered, 21 more people injured, including 18 kids. In recent weeks, Minnesota has once again been at the center of America's heartbreak. But we are also at the center of America's courage and hope. We honor Renee Good today. Renee Good, who left behind 3 children, including a 6-year-old, when she was shot and killed by an ICE agent. Her wife said this: kindness radiated out of her. She literally sparkled, and asked everyone to honor her memory by living her values, rejecting hate and choosing compassion. We also honor the memory of Alex Pretti, a VA intensive care nurse who did one of the most selfless jobs people could think of, caring for our veterans, often in their final hours, a man described by his friends and family as a kind-hearted soul. Both Renee and Alex should be alive today. Mr. President, it is not just these horrific killings. The administration, through their surge of thousands of ICE and Border Patrol agents to Minnesota, outnumbering the 10 largest metropolitan police departments combined in the Twin Cities, outnumbering the sworn officers in the Minneapolis-St. Paul departments by 3 to 1, has repeatedly violated the constitutional rights of the people of Minnesota. The fact is that anyone who cares about federalism, about freedoms, about liberties, should be horrified by what is happening. If you care about the Constitution, I say to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, you should be horrified, because what is happening in our state has been a violation of the First Amendment, the right to assemble. The Second Amendment, Alex was a lawful gun owner, but he was immediately criticized for that, when in fact the video showed very clearly, because eyes don't lie, that his gun was firmly in its holster and it was taken out by Border Control agents. They've been violating the Fourth Amendment, ramming into people's homes without a judicial warrant. Agents have been demanding, without even reasonable suspicion, that Minnesotans show proof of citizenship, just based on how they look. And this administration is going after the Fifth Amendment, the right to due process. It has denied detainees access to counsel. And as the chief judge in the District of Minnesota, a former clerk to Justice Scalia, and a George Bush appointee has made clear, they have been defying court orders. And I say to our Republican colleagues, if you are a defender of liberty, you must defend it when it counts, not just when it's convenient. Federal immigration agents bashed upon a door and detained a Hmong elder, a U.S. citizen whose mom was one of the most loved nurses that took care of our troops during the Vietnam War. They held him at gunpoint without a warrant, took him out of his home in his underwear with nothing but Crocs on his feet, took him into a car, drove him around for an hour, and then they later discovered they had the wrong guy, and in fact, the guy they were looking for had been in jail all along. We've all seen the photos of the 5-year-old, little Liam, standing there scared in his blue rabbit hat with floppy ears and Spider-Man backpack as agents apprehended him. This administration sent a 2-year-old to Texas. Despite a pending court case, the order was issued, but they didn't want to wait for that, sent the 2-year-old to Texas when the mom was waiting back in Minnesota. Thanks to the late-night work of my staff and several local lawmakers, she's been reunited with her mom. But it should never have come to this. a court case was pending, disregarded. In another instance, a U.S. citizen was forced to the ground, placed in a chokehold, and held at a detention center for hours. He offered multiple times to show his U.S. passport, but was ignored. This has gone so beyond any original reason for federal agents. It has gone well beyond the fraud investigation. That was a good reason to bring people to help. But that's not what this was. Not the 2-year-old, not the 5-year-old, not the young elder. Way beyond apprehending violent offenders. Not the 2-year-old, not the 5-year-old, not the young elder. This has turned into a Kristi Noem and Greg Bavino-driven shock and awe public spectacle meant to intimidate our state. In fact, Pam Bondi, on the same day Alex was killed, sent a letter to the governor of Minnesota saying the administration would remove these 3,000 ICE agents if Minnesota violated the privacy of its citizens by turning over their personal voter data, something Republican Secretary of States in states like Georgia have refused to do. The Justice Department has actually sued 24 states for refusing to turn over this data, including, as I mentioned, Georgia and also New Hampshire. 3 district court judges have dismissed these cases. It is clear that our state's being targeted, but they've tried to get this data in 24 states. Now they'll say, we'll bring out the ICE agents. If only you just give us that data. Mr. President, there are 3,000 federal officers in Minnesota, and I can not state it more unequivocally. ICE must leave Minnesota. Law enforcement has made this clear. They can't do their jobs. They can't do their jobs. They can't investigate burglaries. They can't help on some complex cases because they're being called to people's homes all the time because of the ICE agents hanging around homes of just regular citizens, in parking lots, chasing people down. Local businesses, business leaders have come out and said, enough. Police chiefs in our state have joined together. Police chiefs across the nation have joined together and said, we believe in proper police procedures and the rule of law. But the biggest story out of this is the everyday people, the ordinary people doing extraordinary things. They've rallied together, brought food to their neighbors, drove other kids to school, showed up for small businesses, and marching 50,000 strong. I was there. I saw it. 50,000 peaceful marchers in -10 below weather. You know, 250 years ago, our nation declared independence from a king. Our nation was born from a deep revulsion to the idea of an illegal occupation, a standing army of British troops literally taking over our streets, demanding to see papers, acting with cruelty, resorting to violence. In those times, newspapers shared what was happening. Well, today, Americans are seeing it firsthand on video. Americans heard Renee Good's final words to the officer who shot her, "I'm not mad at you." They saw Alex spend his final moments trying to help a woman who'd been shoved to the ground. His last words, "Are you okay?" And just as Americans fought for liberty 250 years ago, they're standing up for liberty now. People across the country are speaking out against this cruelty. And, of course, it is good that Bavino was removed. Other people have to be removed too. Kristi Noem shouldn't be in her job anymore. But mostly, we need these ICE agents out of Minnesota. And we hope that happens soon. Border Patrol, they've began that removal, but the ICE agents have to get out of Minnesota. It is a very dangerous situation. I spoke with Alex's parents the next day after we lost him. Through the tears, they talked about what he was like and how they wanted the world to know the truth and how much it hurt him to have senior administrative officials call him a domestic terrorist, call him a would-be assassin. Alex's sister said Alex always wanted to make a difference in this world, and it's devastating that he won't be here to witness the impact that he was making. We must stand up And so we are asking our colleagues, they know the White House, we've all done our best here, but to tell them it's time for those ICE agents to come home. There must be new leadership in the Department of Homeland Security now, and there must be major reforms to these agencies before this Congress should approve another cent. First, we need to stop these roving bans. This means coordination with state and local law enforcement and no more bounties that encourage immigration officials to detain individuals, even without cause. We need proper training and a code of conduct that includes transparent investigations and meaningful accountability for when agents break the law or violate the Constitution. This also means use of force policies that are the same for local police. Immigration agents, like all law enforcement, should comply with the Fourth Amendment. This bounty system, we've had stories and we have hundreds of cases in our offices right now where people were stopped, a white guy, a Latino, they said, Latino, where are you from? Latino says, I was born in America. They put him in the car, drive him a few blocks, let him out, or take him to the detention center and then let him go. Bonuses, bounties. The mask should come up and the body camera should go on. And there must be thorough, objective, and independent investigations into these killings. The Justice Department refused to cooperate with local investigators in Minnesota after Renee's death, and over a dozen career prosecutors in Minnesota and Washington resigned rather than take part in a miscarriage of justice. After Alex's killing, the federal government blocked state law enforcement from accessing the crime scene. I know because I got panic calls, because I used to be a prosecutor in the county, about what was going on. A federal judge appointed by Donald Trump had to issue an order preventing the federal government from destroying evidence. I'm opposed to this ICE funding bill, and I am very appreciative that people are starting to talk about reforms to this agency. But the money that was passed this summer, $75 billion, making this agency bigger than the FBI, that was wrong. I opposed it, as did my Democratic colleagues. The costs continue to mount. Right now, our federal, state, and local governments are spending an estimated $18 million a week on the surge in Minnesota alone. And what do you got out of it? 2 out of 3 of the shootings resulting in death in Minneapolis, 2 out of 3 were caused by federal agents. I appreciate Senator Schumer, and I appreciate my colleague, Senator Smith, and so many others for saying no to this. And I truly appreciate that a number of our Republican colleagues have started to say that what ICE is doing is wrong. A few have said that Kristi Noem should no longer be in her job. ICE needs to leave Minnesota. It was in 1776 when future First Lady Abigail Adams wrote to her husband, John Adams, describing the retreat of British ships from Boston, saying that their numbers were so large they looked like a forest. But despite their force, it was the determination of those demanding liberty that won that day. For Minnesotans right now, every corner, everywhere, when you drive, really it's not just the city, suburbs, shopping malls, rural areas, they see an ICE agent. There's people that are scared every single day, and it feels like that forest. But out of that forest comes these people of our state that are willing to stand up, citizens that are willing to stand up to help people they may not even know, because they understand what's at stake for the liberties of this country. Mr. President, I yield back. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Senator from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to thank my colleague, Senator Klobuchar, and all of our colleagues who are joining us on the floor this afternoon. So we are here today because we have a full-blown, dangerous emergency unfolding in Minnesota. It is happening right now as I speak, and we need your help to end it. America needs your help. The nation has been appalled by what we have seen happening in our state of Minnesota, the stories that have captured everyone's attention. 2 innocent United States citizens, Alex Pretti and Renee Good, shot and killed on the street in broad daylight by federal agents, just as they were trying to help their neighbors and document with their telephones what was going on, the brutality of it. A 5-year-old in a Spider-Man backpack, Liam Conejo Ramos. So Liam is coming home with his dad, and the agents are there, and Liam is trying to get inside. The agents try to use Liam as bait to lure the mother outside. And Liam is still in detention. He's still in Texas, a 5-year-old, 1,000 miles away from home. Colleagues, my head is so full of stories that might not have gotten all of the attention, but tell the tale of the brutality and the illegality of Operation Metro Surge in Minnesota. This is about a United States citizen, a young man who's walking out of his place of work to get lunch, and he sees an ICE agent. He's concerned. He's afraid that he might get targeted, so he turns around and he walks the other way, and the ICE agent runs after him and tackles the guy. He's a United States citizen, throws him to the ground, injures him, and detains him for hours. All the while, this young man has documents to prove who he is. It's about a teenager in Willmar, Minnesota. Now, Mr. President, Willmar is a smaller regional center in Minnesota. It is a place where the Jennie-O turkey processing plant is. It is an incredible community. And here is a teenager in Willmar who is stopped by ICE. She is beaten. She gets a concussion. And she is detained for 2 days, and she is a United States citizen. So imagine, it's hard to imagine this, but imagine you're in your neighborhood and there are these roving bands of federal agents. They have no identification. They drive around in black Suburbans. They have masks over their face. And like at the drop of the hat, they just leap out and they go after people. They're restraining them. They're hitting them. They're spraying them with chemical agents. And then people are just shoved into Suburbans and driven off. And nobody really knows what happens to them. This is happening in Minnesota if it isn't happening in your neighborhood. And I want people to understand this is not just Minneapolis and St. Paul, where so many of the TV cameras have been. It is Rochester, Minnesota, where the schools are reporting a huge fall off of kids going to school because they're so afraid. Their families are so afraid to send them to school. It's in Mankato, Minnesota, which is in the southern part of the state. It is another regional center, a farming community. I heard today on the public radio station that the local immigrant rights organization is getting 400 calls a day from people who are trying to figure out what their rights are, what to do. A family member of mine is detained. I don't know where they are. This is happening in dozens of cities. So what we have here, colleagues, is a campaign. It is a campaign not about public safety. It is a campaign about fear and intimidation. This is about secret police roaming in our cities with no identification and no name tags. What they do is they overtly target individuals because of the accent that they have, the skin color that they have. And I'm not just imagining this as their motivation, because these agents are telling people this is what's going on. I mean, this is the story of a Hmong woman that I met at Hmong Village just last week, who in tears is telling me that her son has been detained. He's been gone for days and days and days, and she doesn't know when she's going to get him back. Where is he? This is about ICE agents going to a suburban restaurant in the Twin Cities, having lunch, and then after lunch they go into the kitchen to detain the folks that are working in the kitchen. We are seeing this happen every single day. Battering down doors, breaking car windows. There's no pretext, there's no warrant. They're targeting people, not because they know that they've committed some crime, but because of what they look like. And there's this thing that we have in the Twin Cities now, they're called ghost cars. What's this? This is a car that is left in the street, the middle of the street sometimes, a door open. The engine running, the key still in the car, and nobody's gone. Nobody's there. People know what happened. ICE came and got whoever was driving the car and took them away. You know, if you are going through a legal immigration process in this country, you go through a process, and it's your obligation, your legal obligation, to check in with the federal authorities. And what's happening now is that folks are getting legal residence, getting a letter to appear. They have a choice. They know that if they don't comply, they're breaking the law, so of course they comply. But when they go to the courthouse, what happens is an agent is waiting outside the courthouse. An agent is there to detain that person who is following the law, who has done nothing wrong. In fact, they're doing everything they possibly can do to comply with the law, and yet they're being detained. These are not, my colleagues, these are not what you hear from this administration about the so-called worst of the worst. These are people that are active contributing members of our community. These are legal residents who hold green cards, who are being flown to Texas with no legal representation, no access to counsel. And you know what happens sometimes? They get down there, they go through another screening, and the federal agents say, okay, sorry about that, we made a mistake, and they just dump them on the streets of Houston or wherever they may be. No documents, no identification. How are they going to even get home? That's happening in this country right now. And if they're not released, because not everyone is released, if they are not released, people have died in custody. People with no criminal record have been deported to countries that they have never even known. So this is happening in Minnesota, but this is not just Minnesota. I think because Minnesota has resisted so strongly and because the tactics of Operation Metro Surge have been so brutal that we have gotten so much of the attention. But this is not just a Minnesota problem. I ask you, colleagues, to consider how these dangerous and poorly trained and unaccountable ICE agents have been treating Americans who have been exercising their constitutional right to peacefully speak and to demonstrate. These Americans have been intimidated, they have been taunted, they have been beaten, they had even been killed. We've seen the images of people being maced at point-blank range. You can see this in the final pictures of Alex Pretti before he is killed. We know that they are tracking demonstrators with facial ID technology, following them home to intimidate them. And in fact, I've heard stories of demonstrators who have been led home by ICE agents so that those agents are communicating, we know where you live, we know who you are, we want you to be quiet. Pepper balls, tear gas. And this is not just happening, colleagues, in situations of civil unrest. I'm not talking about riots here. I'm talking about a family that is trying to get home. They've got 6 kids in the car. They've been at basketball practice, and they end up with a can of tear gas thrown under their car. It explodes. It lifts the car up off the ground. And that family ends up in the emergency room. They need to be decontaminated from the poison. Now, I'm telling you these stories because I want you to understand a very important thing. What is going on in Minnesota is not about public safety. It has nothing to do with public safety. In fact, what's going on in Minnesota is hurting public safety. As Senator Klobuchar said, police chiefs of suburban communities have come forward and said, this is not sustainable, this is dangerous. A police chief told the story about how one of his own officers, who was off duty, was stopped for no reason by ICE agents, and they threatened to get her out of the car and take her away before she finally tells them, she decides, I have to tell them that I'm a police officer, and they leave her alone. This is about people dialing 911 because an ICE agent is at their home and they are so scared about what to do. So, Mr. President, I want to be clear, we are pro-public safety in Minnesota. We have worked often with federal authorities to catch bad guys and lock them up. But we need ICE out of Minnesota. What is really going on here is a systemic and organized campaign of fear and intimidation. This is government police sanctioned at the highest levels of our government, completely unbound, beating and attacking and detaining and arresting and killing American citizens. This is what America looks like with an authoritarian government with no laws. But here's what's happening. Not only in Minnesota, but around the country, our constituents, your constituents, are watching these videos and they're hearing these stories and they are reading these reports, and what's happening is a sense of moral outrage is rising up. That feeling that you have in your gut that feeling of anguish and anger and disgust, when you know that you're seeing something that is just wrong. You know that it is wrong and that you can't look away from it. And we are uplifted by this moral outrage and the incredible courage of Minnesotans, but we know what we are seeing here. And people are responding everywhere. I have talked to hundreds of people over the past few weeks about what is going on in Minnesota, people who are organizing mutual aid to get groceries and diapers to families, but small town folks that hate to see this happen to their neighbors, and local mayors and farmers and small businesses, Democrats, Republicans, people who aren't political at all, law enforcement officers, faith leaders, Second Amendment supporters, and civil libertarians. I mean, and the man in the truck that I saw when I was in Minneapolis taking groceries to people on Monday. He's in the truck and I drive up. He's like first kind of concerned that I might be ICE. And then he's worried that I'm going to think that he's ICE. And we start to talk. And he says of the president, he said, I voted for him. I told my kids, I talked my kids into voting for him. And I am so upset. I am so embarrassed. I never thought that this would happen. This is so messed up. This, colleagues, is the coalition of the horrified, the people who see this and feel a sense of moral outrage, people who are bound together not by politics or faction or identity, but that feeling in your gut that what you're seeing is wrong and that we have to do something about it, that this can't be how we operate. So that brings us to here today in this august chamber of the United States Senate. And we ask ourselves, okay, what do we do? What is our place here? And we've all worked really hard to get here. And we all are here, I believe, because we love this country. And I suspect that almost all of us who serve in this chamber understand, they see the threat, we see the threat that this poses to the very underpinnings of our country. And I am so grateful to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, who have spoken out, who have called for a fair and impartial investigation, who have called for changes of leadership. I agree with that. That's all really important. But colleagues, that is not going to be enough to stop this. This is a crucial moment in our country, not just for Minnesota, but for our entire country. And our answer to the question of what we do in the face of this illegality, this brutality, our answer to all those people, all those constituents who feel that sense of moral outrage, who are begging us to stand up for them, our answer can't be that we're not going to do anything. It can't be the status quo. It can't be, well, the procedures of the Senate and the House make it really impossible for us to get something done, so there's really not that much that we can do right now. That's not acceptable. But colleagues, I can see a path forward. And look, I want to be really clear. In my view, we need to start over with the Department of Homeland Security. I think it should be ripped down to the studs and that we should start over. But that is not the question for today. That is not the question for right now. Right now, we need to take immediate, common sense steps to stop the worst of the violence and the violations that Americans are suffering. So, to be clear, I will not vote for any funding for DHS if we do not take action to stop this emergency unfolding in my state. And I truly believe that we can find agreement on both sides of the aisle for a path forward. And it will not solve all of these problems, but we can address the worst of the assault. We need to end these roving patrols of federal agents that are detaining and arresting people who've done nothing wrong. You can't break down someone's door and arrest them without a warrant. We need accountability. I mean, ICE agents should be required to abide by the same set of laws, the same use of force standards that your local police department abides by. We need a fair and unbiased investigation. And we need no more of the secret police. No more masks and agents without proper identification and body cameras. I mean, to me, these seems like pretty simple and common sense and reasonable reforms that can only be achieved through the force of law. We are long past the moment where any letter or executive order or promise can secure our trust. This is our path forward. I am thinking about, as I wrap up this speech, and I'm thinking about all of my colleagues who are here to speak with such intention about what's happening, I want to just take a pause to acknowledge my beloved Minnesota. I am so proud to be your senator. And you know, so many people around the country are looking to you, to us, for hope. And you are showing the world how to respond to violence and how to stand up to bullies with strength and with dignity and with peace. You're putting your own safety and your own bodies on the line to protect your neighborhoods and your democracy. You're risking your own safety to document the emergency and inhumanity unfolding on our streets. And you're even sometimes doing it by singing. In Minnesota, we show up for our neighbors. We help people out. We don't give in to bullies. We stand strong. We stand in the park with a candle in our hands to mourn, but also to kindle hope. And I know that Minnesotans are going to stay strong because, as Dr. King preached, we know how to put our faith into action. As Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President,